Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Out of the Park 23 as the Minnesota Twins. This is Catch Up Edition. So, unfortunately, the audio got corrupted on a couple of videos. One that I did, unfortunately, release, and then a couple of kind of my backlog of pre recorded videos. The audio did not record there either. I believe I figured out what was going on. Something happened with my OBS where it glitched out to that it was not recognizing my microphone. That should be fixed now, should be fixed moving forward. So I apologize for the issues there. I'll try to kind of go over the stuff that's happened. It picked a really bad time to do it because it was the expansion video, is kind of the one that I just released that did not have audio. So let's talk about that first. So we can kind of actually see how they're doing. Um, is that both? So Mexico City Swamp Dragons and the Sexsmith Unicorns are the two new teams. Sexsmith Unicorns was the name chosen by my wife because that is a real city that exists in Canada, and she is big on unicorns. So we can see here that this is a tiny market because it's a small city in Canada. Fan interest is super high because of the fact that, this is a new team. But they're not off to a great start. They've got some pieces to work with. They made a trade, or no, they picked up Pagas in the expansion draft, and he's been a pretty good piece for them. The other thing that I will note with the expansion teams was, instead of just setting it up purely to be the expansion draft to generate their organization, I basically did one of the options Out of the Park gives you is to just generate a minor leagues for these teams. So I did decide to do that. There were a couple of pretty decent pieces in that. Sal Morales was probably the best piece the Unicorns got. Looks like he hasn't been hitting super well, but he's incredible defensively. Let's see, what is he? Yeah, 13.2 zone rating. I mean, this guy's going to win a lot of gold gloves. Or even if the bat doesn't turn out to be super great, high work ethic, high intelligence, that defensive ratings, that's incredible. And that will be a good piece for them to build around, especially that now with also adding, I believe it's Pages, I don't think it's Pages, from the Dodgers, who they did not protect in the expansion draft, led to a team where looks like they have a really good bullpen right now. With Clase, I believe they grabbed the expansion draft. They grabbed Taylor Rogers. Yeah, so their bullpen is good. They'll have to figure out starting pitching and everything, but it's nice to see that the expansion teams aren't the literal worst. Mexico City's actually fallen up. They were leading this division not super long ago. Yeah, Houston's won 15 games in a row, so that'll do that. But their best piece is this guy Luis Chappelle, who I thought he was an all-star. I guess wasn't. Somebody else must have gotten it. But I mean, this is a good pitcher. It's a captain as well, which is super nice. I mean, this is a guy that you would love to have to build your team around. And yeah, the offense has been pretty good for them. This guy Chandler Redmond is somebody they picked up from the Cardinals in the expansion draft. Strikes out way too much, but with those ratings, you'll take it. That's a good bat to have in the middle of your order to build around. And yeah, so these are the two expansion teams. This one is Mexico City, so this is a bigger market, which will be nice for them. I think this is a team that might end up actually having their budget might kind of grow a little bit more than Sexsmith because they have that larger market size. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of what these two teams do moving forward. The other obvious thing that you will notice here is that I very heavily rearranged the leagues. So I personally am not a huge fan of the unbalanced divisions, where if you added just the two teams to a, just say you pick the Central, for example, where you had six teams in the AL Central, five in the AL East, five in the AL West. I'm not a huge fan of that, so I split it off. Oh yeah, I guess I should talk about this too, because I don't. It's been a little bit since I recorded, kind of for where this would have been, but the Miami Marlins rebranded, which is a thing that they always seem to do in my saves, and it's a point of amusement for me, where they are now the Jacksonville Spartans. I don't know if this is. I guess this gives them a little bit more market. I'm not sure what Miami is, but I can't imagine it's that much different. Fan loyalty is bad. That's not super surprising because they just moved. Interest, I think, is higher than 54 based on this, because that looks like about 50 to 55. But yeah, so that's another thing that happens. Yeah, so that's fun. So back to the divisions, though. What I did was I tried to group everything geographically as much as possible. I got to have a little bit of fun of, say, hey, you big four spendy teams, you all get to be in a division with each other. So that's fun to me to get to do that. But really, I tried to kind of group everybody in reasonable ways where you would get your logical rivals in your division with you. Sexsmith is like Western Canada, so it made the most sense to group them in with like Seattle and such. So like you've got kind of the two LA teams are together, two Chicago's are together, the New York teams are together. And yeah, so it was I tried to kind of keep all those rivalries together, make the four-team divisions, and then the playoffs are, as of right now, the same as what they were before, more or less, in the sense that it's still six teams, which means it's the four division winners plus two wild cards instead of three. So I'm open to looking and seeing if I maybe want to change it to seven teams for next year to have there be three wildcard teams. But I think for right now, at the very least, the plan is to just leave it as is and see if it causes any problems. I'm not really expecting it to. I think it should be fine. But that is the big change there. Which the funny thing for this was that I forgot about awards when I did this. So the in Out of the Park, they give you the notification about expansion right away to begin the off season. So I was like, cool. I was excited for expansion to happen. Went and figured everything out, reorganized everything, and then was like, oh, awards. I wanted the awards to be based on the last season. So you can tell there's obviously a bunch of teams that are in the conference they were not in before. So then I had to go back, kind of reset all of the divisions, do awards voting, and then go back and do that. Put them back to here. So to talk about awards real quick, Rocco did win Manager of the Year. The Twins won 100 games, so that's not super shocking. As far as some other stuff, Ryan Presley was the reliever of the year 2024. Not super surprising when you consider these stats. 48 saves. I mean, that's not a thing that should really surprise anybody. DeGrom and Nola both got votes for the Cy Young, as well as Presley got a couple as well. Which really, I think, shows how impossible it is for a reliever to win the Cy. Of having a year like this, where, I mean, he was a 5 R-WAR pitcher. I like R-WAR a lot better for awards for pitchers because of the fact that that's more based on ERA, which is what actually happened, as opposed to FIP, which is what should have happened. So, I mean, being a 5-WAR pitcher and finishing, I think he was like 8th or 9th in the Cy, that's just shows really how impossible it is. Which, like, I think I'm mostly okay with that, but we'll see. MVP voting, DeGrom did get a vote, as well as 3 of my hitters got votes last year. Jorge Polanco, Carlos Correa, and Jose Miranda. all got votes. They all had really good years. Jorge Polanco won the Silver Slugger at second base last year because he played a decent amount there between kind of the various injuries that I had. And Carlos Correa won outright. He is currently injured, having shortstop problems this year. Won the Gold Glove last year and in 2024, as well as the 2022 one that he won, and 23 missed a bunch of games. He's going to miss a bunch of games this year as well. I'm about to get him back, though. So that is nice. Obviously, seeing Polanco and Marquez here, I did execute their team options for this year. I also extended Ryan Presley, which I think has turned out to be pretty good value still. 15 million's a little high, but he's been maybe the best closer in baseball again this year. So I can't really complain. It's really nice to have that back end of the bullpen, and where it kind of lets me bring in Duran a little bit earlier. So I think I'm going to like having this moving forward, even if I don't retain Presley past 2 years from now, or even next year potentially if he opts out, where I might go to like a Colby White to be my end game pitcher. So, something like that. I think I like that for my bullpen. So Max Kepler is obviously not here. We gave him the qualifying offer, which he turned down. He has not been good for Texas at all. And this is a monster contract that he got. 5 years, 24 million a year. And while I can't say I would have predicted anything like this, a sub 70 OPS plus, I mean, good defensively like you would expect in right field. They were playing him in center for a while, which I'm not a huge fan of. But this was a massive, massive drop off. Yeah, I mean, there's not really else a ton I can say. I mean, it shows why I didn't want to re-sign him, because I was expecting the downturn, but that's a pretty crazy downturn, I think. We also traded Jorge Alcala. We kind of just got a couple of minor league depth pieces. I think are both in Double A right now. Yeah, this guy Highland Hall, as well as Nathaniel Perez, were the two pieces we got for him. They're just minor league depth. I wasn't sold on him. Funny thing that actually happened with him was Jorge Alcala. Was that I traded him before salary arbitration kicked in, and then he got non-tendered by the Marlins, or I should say the Spartans, because that's where I traded him to. So that was really odd. But yeah, so that, as far as that stuff goes, kind of off-season stuff, I think we are now pretty caught up. The decision that I did just make was to extend German Marquez, because he has been pretty good both years for me. I think he's past the big injury that he had, the torn UCL that I was concerned about, of why he was able to be signed for the contract that he was. But really has been pretty good with not having any issues. You can see it's all been day to day in the last 2.5 years. So that's really good. And he's been good for me. He was good in the postseason. And I really like this for a pitcher, specifically the team that I have. When I have, especially when I'm fully healthy, the Correa-Royce Lewis combination up the middle is probably the best up the middle defense in the league. I mean, just you look at these guys: 70 defense at second base, 70 defense at shortstop. Really can't get too much better than that. So I think that that's a profile that should hold up. The last year or two might be a little iffy. I was trying real hard to get him to go to 4 years, and he really wanted that 5th year. So I decided to do it because I think DeGrom is off the table. I'm not willing to give him 4 years. He's getting hit a lot a lot harder this year. He's having a lot more of these kind of blow up starts. My scouts dropped on him quite a bit. The velocity's down multiple miles an hour. I think he's done. Alcantara, I honestly might try to move in the off season because he's been bad this year. We'll see how we kind of develop throughout the year, see if he turns it around at all. But he's really not been a pitcher I want to be throwing out there right now. Nola's been pretty much exactly what Aaron Nola has been. It's still on that team option for next year. He wants probably a little more money than I want to pay him. 24 million a year is a little rough. Because the nice thing with Marquez is that 15 to 16 is better than I would get for a pitcher like him on the market. Whereas Nola, that's probably about what it would take to sign him on the open market. Probably is that roughly $24 million a year. So we're gonna let that sit for now. Gomez has more or less recovered to that 2023 year, which is really nice to see. He's about to start costing money though, so that's a little unfortunate. I'm thinking about trying to maybe lock him up, give him a $5 or $6 million deal. This is pretty good. Honestly, I'm gonna have to come back to this before I do any more simming because I like this contract quite a bit. Gets me through age 31. And this is a guy who could be my number 2, number 3 starter. Yeah, we'll have to think about that quite a bit. Austin Love has been pretty good as a reliever, mixed as a starter. I think this is really, it's just one bad outing as a reliever. Really jacked that up quite a bit. But he's been pretty solid for me. One of the nice pitching things that I have had is Rocker seems to have kind of adjusted after the return from injury. He's been pretty good this year. Yeah, I mean, you can see the 3.6 ERA even with this awful start that he just had. So that's good to see him be back online. He'll probably be one of the people that will be competing for a starting spot next year. So as far as kind of prospecty stuff, Rodriguez is up to AAA and hitting fairly well here. Definitely be looking at him potentially for next year having a spot, as well as he's hurt. Joshua Baez has really kind of turned it up a notch from the Joe Ryan trade. He's really starting to develop into a piece that makes that trade not be too terrible. Because Joe Ryan's actually having a very good year. Okay, I probably should have typed in the full thing. Yeah, he's been very, very good for them this year. He's kind of started to really figure it out. He an all-star this year? Yeah, he was. So, yeah, that's a little unfortunate. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not a bad contract at all. But yeah, but I mean, we got Austin Love out of that. We got Baez out of that. And honestly, the third piece is kind of starting to figure it out a little bit. Yeah, and Mejia is playing really, really well in the Dominican League. We'll see how he does in the Florida League now. So that trade's, I still think it was not a good one for me, but I think there's potential that it's going to work out okay. So let's see. The other trade that we need to talk about is this one. We went out and we acquired Joey Gallo. This was our big kind of trade deadline move. Was really the biggest piece we gave up was Hudson Potts. Because honestly, just the start to his year was just so hilariously bad that I was getting more concerned about it to the point where, yeah, so he actually is not going to be salary arbitration eligible because I sent him down to AAA for a decent amount of time. And even this was he was had a like 80 OPS plus in AAA for a month, and I'm like, okay, this is a problem. So we kind of started with that, and then we included really the only other piece I think I'm more concerned about giving up is De Andrade, where because he was having a really good year in High A, which I was kind of saying, well, I don't know if this is really gonna stick, but yeah, and defensively he's been like he's a decent defensive shortstop. Like he could play there. He's probably better at second or third, but he can play short. Geddes is nothing. He was a good defender I picked up. McCade Brown was a minor league free agent I signed I think 2 years ago. It's been good, but kind of whatever. Steven Hajar has been kind of up and down for me in the minors. I think I just have a little bit more of an abundance of depth of pitchers like him. Honestly, I think if I went back to it, I would take out Andrade and try to replace him with another Hajar-esque pitcher of maybe like a Hedrick or kind of like any of these guys that aren't rocker or even like Escobar, Osman, Povich. Like somebody like that, if I could have made the trade work that way, then I think I would do that in retrospect. But is what it is. And let's see. What else needs to be talked about? I think probably just mostly general what's going on with the team, because obviously we usually do updates before. Oh, nope. There actually is the draft. Let's see. Okay, is this going to let me... Okay. I think the way we'll have to do this then is to go look at the transactions log. Wait for this to respond. I guess while we're waiting for the game to respond, we can talk quickly about All-Stars as well. Jacob deGrom was an All-Star. He had a much better first half of the year than he's had since the All-Star break. He's gotten hit a couple times. Both Presley and Duran both made the All-Star game out of the bullpen, and then Royce Lewis and Sal Frelick has really turned it on this year. And I guess we should kind of look at these guys a little more closely. Frelick's on pace to have a 5 WAR year. He's been, I mean, this has been his career year for sure. This trade with Milwaukee is one that I'm going to be very happy about for a while, because we really gave up not a whole lot. Oh, Stashek's finally figured something out. Yeah, so I mean, they eventually got something out of Stashak, who was just nothing for so long. As well as just kind of some other minor league pieces. Sands isn't even in the organization anymore. And then a guy in AA and a guy in AAA. So for Sal Frelick, who's just been a very, very good piece for me and has potentially even turned it up a notch, that's really good. Ethan Murray hasn't turned out to be a whole lot. Lara, this has been his best year offensively, and it hasn't been a good one. But he's good defensively, at least. So, yeah, I mean, that's a trade that's worked out pretty well for me. Oh, yeah, Joey Gallo, I only have to pay 50% of his salary. So it's about a $13 million cap hit for me. Yeah, 13.9. So, yeah, next year's caps, the next couple of years now are much more interesting cap-wise of some decisions we'll have to make about those things. So it'll be good to kind of have to actually go back into some of this, where this current year I really didn't have a lot of decisions to make. But yeah, like Bo Naylor, I'm going to non-tender. He's pretty much busted out completely at this point, which is why when did I do this contract? I don't remember if I talked about this or not. I don't remember where that conversation was, but we can have it again real quick. We haven't gotten a lot. I've struggled to acquire catching prospects. and the ones that I have acquired haven't really turned out. So we extended Hunt. Yeah, prior to the 2026 season would mean it probably was this year. So yeah, yeah, this is the contract, 7 years, 58 million. You get up through 33, age 33 season for a guy who's a very, very good defensive catcher. That's kind of fine. I don't expect, like, I expect this to regress. Like, this is, I think, about the year I'm expecting from him is 90 OPS plus, fine with the bat, but is very good defensively and puts up 3.5 WAR. Like, I will gladly pay, $10 million a year for that type of production out of my catcher position. So we've talked about that. We've gotten our the other All Stars we should talk about is Royce Lewis. He's definitely struggled since the All Star break as well, like DeGrom, where he was on pace for 4+ WAR because he was actually an above average hitter. But again, the glove here is really, really good. It's what carries this contract. I wish I wasn't paying him quite that much there, but I mean, I'll gladly pay for the defense up the middle is just so good and so valuable to have him to be able to play every 3 days in center field as well. It's super valuable to this team. We only have 3 more years of Buxton, it looks like, where he has wrecked injury proneness. We actually haven't had the Buxton injury happen yet this year. It's usually closer to the playoff time anyway. But yeah, so this will be a little more fun in the offseason. I'm expecting a lot more to actually happen in the 2025-2026 offseason than what happened in this last year. But to kind of talk about where the team is currently at, we are 10 games up in the division. We're starting to cruise a little bit. Milwaukee at this was 16 games into the year. Milwaukee was 14-2 at that point in the year. And then they've just been pretty bad since then. As far as kind of our team goes, Frelick has been really good this year. Blanco, I was a little surprised, didn't make the All-Star team. Probably because he was mostly as a DH, not a second baseman, because I hadn't had the Correa injury. We've dealt with, both having Correa and Amaya being out is a little unfortunate for my up the middle depth, because it means that I'm having to play either Polanco at short or this guy I called up, Miguel Hernandez. So no bat, but good glove. I'm kind of hoping that I have enough bat around him for it to be okay. Pavelko is spending a decent amount of time in the majors. He's started to pick it up a little bit. We called him up when we sent Potts down because he was off to a massive, massive start at the beginning of the year in AAA. He's started to pick it up more lately. Or if we take a look at these splits in the major league, was not good to start with. Had a very good June. July looks like was down from that. But we're kind of getting there again to having him potentially be a piece that can be helpful and be able to play most of the infield, which is nice. Old fan favorite Eddie Rosario is back, where he was having a very good year at AAA. Kjerstad was struggling, and I thought it would be fun to call up Eddie Rosario, so I did, and he's been fine. You could certainly make the argument that I should be giving that time to a Rodriguez, or even letting Kjerstad try to play it out more because there's more of a chance that he'll be relevant past this year. But honestly, it's mostly a Rosario is fun, so I'm gonna let it play out that way. So that's kind of the hitting. Miranda's a big question to me right now about moving forward. We're $6 million, quite a bit. The bat is something that's good. Like he's a good hitter. I think he'll always be a 110 to 120 OPS plus hitter for the next 5-6 years. But is that enough to justify the type of contract it would take to extend him am I going to get a 5 WAR season out of him again when the glove seems to be regressing a little bit at least at third, and I'm sort of more needing to play him there with the acquisition of Gallo, which forced Kirilov to first base. What I want to do with him moving forward is a little bit more in question. Because I do think Kvoko is the better defensive third baseman than him. So, just he's got more range and a better arm. So I would expect him to be better there. So that's something I sort of have to think about right now. Like, it's not a non-tender him next year. At 6 million, I'll gladly take this. But if we go back to the salaries, to find Jose Miranda, like this 15.9, that's a lot harder to justify. So we'll see. Polanco is going to be priced out for us, where I can't afford to pay him this. I have Royce and I have Correa that are both locked up pretty much through almost entirely that year. So I think, again, this is purely a bat situation. And yeah, he's been good in this sim, really, other than this 2023 season. But I can't justify paying him $26 million to mostly DH and play some second and some short. Now, there is the question of, do I move him to third and play him at third base, especially if Miranda is more in question, because he's a 50 defensively there. So that's certainly an option. Oh, most comparable player, Carlos Correa. That's kind of funny. So that's something that I'll have to think about. I still don't think I will sign him. I think that's a lot of money to commit to mostly just a bat. But it's been a pretty good one. So it's something I'll have to think about. Extremely popular player. Also doesn't hurt the case for keeping him around. I think more likely than not he'll get qualifying offered, and he will let him walk. Kirilov is kind of my reminder to myself, I think, at this point, to not pay money for just a bat. Because I really look at it, yeah, he was worth almost 7 WAR this year when I gave him the extension. And then since then, he's been worth 2, because he's not really like a big plus anywhere defensively. He was not good in right field. And yeah, I mean, he's not really a first baseman either, but he can play there and be fine. And the contract is not great. But this is sort of my reminder, I think, to myself of, if I'm gonna be paying for somebody, I need to make sure they're providing value other than just the bat, because bats can come and go. So yeah, Jonathan Aranda's been, again, kind of pretty consistently about this. I think he's struggled lately, because that was sitting at about 106, 107. And having him around has been good, but we're starting to get... I mean, this ARB estimate is a lot better, because it was at something like 4.4, I think, at one point, which would have been really rough. I think 2 million to fill the role that he does is definitely worth it, where he can kind of back up at second, third, first. It is a little unfortunate that he can't really play short, because I would like to have that not have to have a backup shortstop that fills pretty much just that role, like what Amaya does. Amaya actually was hitting really well this year before his injury. So I can make the argument that I keep him around instead of Amaya, or instead of Aranda, because even if the bat isn't actually as good, because I don't think that his bat is as good, just kind of based on all of these ratings, as Jonathan Aranda. If he's better defensively, then there's an argument to keeping him and letting Aranda walk, but I don't think we need to do that quite yet. On the pitching side of things, if we look at the starting rotation, DeGrom was doing really well going into the All-Star break. You can see around here. I mean, these were the two really good months. ERA's been above 5 in both June and July. So that's problematic for sure. And the FIP and ERA are pretty close. And I mean, the strikeouts are down, the walks are up. I mean, just it's not extendable, I don't think, at this point. Or maybe if he was willing to keep going at 1 year, maybe, but I don't see him coming back at the end of the year. Alcantara's just been bad. There's really not too much else to say at this point other than that. Marquez we extended. Gomez we've kind of got back on track. The bullpen's been very good. It's nice to have a lot of pieces in AAA that I can call up if I do have anybody struggling and know that I'll be able to have them be effective. Cano was the guy that we kind of was like, well, it's either DFA or keep, and he's been good, so I'm going to keep him around. Probably up until ARB estimate, I don't know that I'm going to actually pay him in arbitration, but he's having a very good year this year, so we'll think about it. So, yeah, that's sort of where we're at pitching-wise. Bullpen, very good. Starting rotation, starting to have some cracks in it. There are some arms down here that are people that we could definitely call up if the need arises, even with trading away Hajar. So, once again, I apologize for the issues with the most recent video of having the audio problems. Wasn't something I've been checking super closely because I haven't had any issues with it. I won't make that mistake again. This video, I apologize as well for the length of it here. I'm trying to not have such long videos, but that's just sort of where we have to be at with this one. I guess the one other thing that we should look at is the draft. I think that's going to be here, right? Kind of can look at some of these top people. This was our first round pick. Maybe center field, probably more likely to be in the corners. Isn't actually hitting in rookie ball, but that's okay. The bat looks really good potentially here. Of all 5 of the tools, grading out in the green was why I went that route. Elias Guyton's a fun profile where it's, yeah, he's not going to strike out a ton of people. Hope that it's maybe a little more than 4.8. But super high movement, super high control, ground ball pitcher. That works really well with where my team is right now. And even by the time that a guy like that gets called up, still possible. Dylan Adkins was listed as a starter. I had no intentions of having him actually pitch. Why did they say this is a 40 overall pitcher? No, incorrect. But this is a bat that I think should be pretty decent if this does develop out. Decent outfield range as well. And is actually hitting pretty well in rookie ball. So I think that was a good call there. Back-to-back catchers. Isaiah Williams is the better defender of the two. So the bat's not as important for it to develop. Wow, he's striking out a 32% rate with that avoid Ks. So that's obviously kind of instantly problematic. And then Jim Carr, I have a lot of questions about. Oh my lord, he's been even worse. Doesn't have a single extra base hit. Hate to see that. Then the 5th round pick was this guy, Jose Del Rio, which is, the bat, it's kind of a hope and pray on the bat. Low work ethic's kind of problematic too, but is a legit center fielder, so that was sort of the gamble there. Brock Jessup was the obligatory college arm, who's been kind of fine. Nothing else that's like super exciting in here. So yeah, that is where we are at. And we'll be back to maybe a little bit shorter videos. The game plan still is to, I guess I shouldn't say still because I talked about this in a video that has no audio. But the game plan is to start doing a couple of what used to be a couple of videos, combining them into one at a time. Now of doing something like having starting the year doing one video that is including the draft, and then having kind of that be the first video for the season, and then the second video for the season covering from the draft to the end of the year, and then doing the playoffs like we have been and doing the off season. I'm not 100% sure how I want to do the off season yet. I might condense that into one video as well. I might leave it at two. I'm not sure yet. Just because we're getting to the point where I think getting through seasons is more interesting because there's less of the kind of original team and seeing how they're doing. Let me know in the comments if you want to, if you like how I'm doing it right now, or if you're okay with the transition that I'm thinking about doing. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.